Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'm going to discuss a few things related to YouTube and silly season. I'm going to explain what silly season is for those who don't know what it is, and how it affects YouTubers like myself, as well as others who discuss politics, and what I'm doing about it, because actually it opens itself up to experimentation. Some of you may have noticed a few changes as well, and it's quite interesting because this is what we can now call silly season, but although in theory it happens every year, I think this is the first proper one since I started this channel. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button so you stay notified. So, first of all, what is silly season? So, it's the period of time in British politics where Parliament is in recess. Now, what happens is, so MPs have gone off to their own constituencies. So there's no debates in Parliament. There's no arguments in Parliament. The government itself, unlike other recess times, may be quite low key as well, because ministers are allowed a holiday, and some of those ministers may also want to go back to their constituencies. So although the government is still doing its work, that doesn't go into recess, and there are announcements, and there have been announcements. There's not as much. If you're a political journalist or a political commentator, there's not really as much to get your teeth into. And the reason it's called silly season is because political journalists still have a job, and the sort of mainstream outlets still have to pump out their content, but they're struggling because MPs aren't bickering about anything in particular, and the government aren't really doing much other than announcing things. It's like, great, yeah, but it's not really exciting, is it? All terribly important, but not very exciting. And just to give you a couple of examples of how this manifests, because political journalists, they need the clicks, right? And there was, when I was very young, okay, it wasn't really, you didn't need to find anything too spicy because there wasn't very much competition for the news. When I was very young, I remember there were 3 television channels. You had BBC One, BBC Two and ITV. So 3 television channels, and 2 of them were the same broadcaster. And then you had newspapers, but again, even that, not as much as today. And you had no social media, you had no online content or anything. You had a bit of CFAX, but again, that was also the BBC. Or Oracle on ITV, I guess. Then you had Channel 4, but there was no great competition. Now there's lots of competition. So you've got to attract with the flashy headlines. You need the clickbait. So a couple of examples. So one from when Labour were last in power, long time ago. I remember one summer where, so Tony Blair was on holiday, which meant that John Prescott, who was the Deputy Prime Minister, was, well, deputising. And I forget who it is, I couldn't be bothered to look it up, it really doesn't matter, had made a big deal of the fact that John Prescott was seen playing croquet at his grace and favour home. Right, he was playing croquet. As if, he's supposed to be running the country. Why isn't he chained to the desk 24/7? What's going on? There was no emergency, by the way, at the time. There was absolutely no emergency, no national emergency, no international emergency. It was just summer. And that's the nature of silly season. You have to report on something absolutely mad to get the eyeballs. There's nothing mad going on, so you just have to make something out of nothing. And you get this every summer in theory. However, I would suggest, now that I've sort of thought about it, and since I've started this channel, I began this channel in earnest in 2019, but yeah, technically in 2018. But I wasn't doing regular content in 2018. So 2019 is my regular content. And every summer from 2019 up until last summer, there has always been a lot of spicy political news. So technically we haven't had a silly season until this year. Even like, it's not even me just saying, oh, because Labour are just more sensible now. I mean, that is part of it. But even last summer when Labour were in, they'd just come in. So there was a lot of hype about the new changes coming in. And then we had the riots. So summer had news, right? This summer, I mean, I'm just going to have a little look here. What have we got? So we've got various things around the fact that first France, now the UK, now Canada is going to recognise Palestine. So there's a bit of news around that. Okay, I've already had my say on that. Air traffic control. Okay, we've had a problem with air traffic control. But, I mean, in America that might be a story, but not in this country because we didn't actually defund air traffic control. So that's not political. there's not a lot going on, if I have to be said. There is, ministers are making statements, but it's mostly on one issue, and that's all that's feeding into the news, and you can only do like so many videos on that. So I'd already, recognised that this was coming. So I thought to myself, okay, so there's going to be, how, and how it affects YouTubers like myself is the same way it affects a political journalist. In that, there's always politics you can talk about. There's always things you can talk about. Is it going to get a load of views? The stuff that's coming out over summer, not so much. So at that point, you have a choice. I suppose, three choices. I suppose I have three choices. The first is to make the best of it and spend my summer trying to pick out what I think are probably the best, which will mostly take the form of an almost, if not actually, daily commentary on the ridiculous antics of various idiots in Reform UK, particularly at the council level, right? Or I suppose I could just go off on a 6-week holiday. Wouldn't be making very much money then. Or I will just do more in-depth content on something that is topical, but where the bulk of the video is an explainer on what could be evergreen content, could be the sort of stuff that's still, useful to talk about in a few months' time, or just builds up the narrative of where we got to here. And you may have noticed a bit over the last week where my videos, for a start, have become, most of them, not all of them, and it won't always be like this, have become significantly longer, as I'd already sort of planned to do some more in-depth videos. And they've tended to touch on something that's happening in the news today, but just as a tangent rather than focused on it, if you see what I mean. So that's what I chose. I chose not to go. I don't like holidays anyway. And I certainly didn't choose to just try and poke fun at Lee Anderson every day for the next 6 weeks. So yes, you may have noticed some things. In terms of other things I've been doing in general, you may also notice that I'm doing a live stream now on Mondays and Fridays at lunchtime. Just to see if I can... My thinking on that is that sometimes you do get spicy political news on a Friday or Monday lunchtime. So rather than just put them out as and when, do a live stream at that time, half an hour, and then there's a decent chance if there's something mad going to break in politics, it might break it round about that time. So that could be useful as well. And I've also been having a play with thumbnails. Some of you will notice, some of you won't have done. Because generally speaking, what I've been doing, thumbnails are always a big thing to look at on YouTube, because no one's going to click on your content unless the thumbnail grabs them. So you need a thumbnail that stands out, but then also gets them to click. In terms of the getting them to click, the title can also work in tandem with it. So I've been trying some different things with thumbnails. Incredibly inconsistent results. So I'm going to keep having a little play at that. I'm not changing to any. So some of you may have already noticed, by the way, and may think I'm already changing it. What you can do on YouTube is a test and compare. So on some videos, you can have it. You can put up to 3 different thumbnails, and it'll share them. It'll show so many people one thumbnail, so many another, and then if you've got the third one up, so many another. And then after a little while, it'll report back to you to see which one did best. So that at the moment is. There are some interesting results from it, but it is largely inconclusive as well. So I'll still be working on that in the hopes that I can, over this, because this summer now is experiment time for me. It is experiment time because you haven't got a lot of spicy political news. But there will be, not necessarily in September. It actually usually kicks off in October, you find. But again, we're also in different times. The rules that existed for the first few years that I was building up this channel may no longer be the same. Because most of the, I suppose, the spicy political news these days comes from America, because that also affects us here. Trump's trade wars has a huge effect on us here. And yet, so a lot of that is going to be what people are going to consider really important news as well. So just to give you a general idea of if you've noticed in a different style, that's sort of the reason. And it may well be that when we get back into Parliament coming back and, and the government making bigger announcements and things like that, particularly, conference season, but then usually find the period after the conferences for whatever reason, it's usually completely unrelated, but for whatever reason, you usually find mad stuff happens in like October, November, December time in British politics. So we will see. But it may also be that what I do is I sort of weave them in. So if there's like mad breaking news, I discuss that. And if not, maybe I pick on something that's a bit more evergreen and touch on to something that is maybe happening at a lower level in politics at the time. So that's sort of what I'm doing. Just if you need an explanation there, and this may happen, and long may it happen. Long may we have silly seasons, because you know what silly season is? It's a time where politics isn't ridiculously over the top. That's what it is. That's what it represents. It is just a challenge if you spend every day talking about politics. But let me know what you think in the comments below anyway. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.